The most explosive detail in the latest Epstein files isn't who was prosecuted, it's who wasn't. Buried inside thousands of pages are documented leads, names, financial trails, repeated contacts that the Department of Justice possessed for years. Leads that pointed outward, leads that suggested a network. And yet, only one associate ultimately faced federal prosecution, Ghislaine Maxwell. That's not a footnote. That's a structural decision. Because those files didn't surface through routine transparency. They were forced into public view after Congress overrode resistance and compelled disclosure, meaning the executive branch, under successive administrations, had information it chose not to fully operationalize. And that reframes everything. Now, Congress is attempting something the DOJ never completed, compelling testimony from one of the most powerful men in Epstein's orbit, Les Wexner, a billionaire who rarely operates in public, now placed under oath in Ohio, questioned about a financial relationship that reportedly transferred over $1 billion cumulatively to Epstein. $1 billion.
Lawmakers led this questioning today. Some Republican staff members, we're told, also attended. Now, Wexner's a key figure because we already knew Epstein made so much money off of him. This is one example of a photograph from the Oversight Committee with an individual redacted, again, under the reasons we've been told, but the two men having a drink, hanging out, whatever you see there. Now, Epstein made money off this man, and we know big sums were also returned. Now, lawmakers say their evidence shows over $1 billion cumulatively went from Wexner to Epstein, and that he's in the files over 1,000 times. You're looking at one file, one photograph. There are many, many other references and contacts with him.
And Wexner appears in the files more than 1,000 times. That frequency alone raises a question no one can evade. How does that level of proximity square with claimed ignorance? Wexner's position is clear. He says he was duped. He describes Epstein as a world-class manipulator, a compartmentalized operator who presented different faces to different people. He argues he was financially exploited, alleging Epstein stole from him, and that he cut ties after Epstein's first legal trouble in Florida. That defense is carefully constructed. It separates financial victimhood from criminal complicity. It draws a firewall between business deception and sex trafficking. But here's the tension point. Deception does not erase duration. This wasn't a brief encounter. This was years of access, authority, and financial control. Epstein managed Wexner's money, held power of attorney, operated inside elite spaces because of that sponsorship. And when lawmakers question how someone so financially sophisticated could miss repeated red flags, the answer cannot simply be, he fooled me, because ignorance at that altitude has consequences.
The key question that I'm going to get to here is whether Wexner knew that or not. Wexner suggests that he was only and essentially one of Epstein's financial victims, and others were Epstein's sex trafficking victims, and that basically Epstein had a lot of people fooled. Now, we should note Wexner has not faced any legal allegations from the DOJ, and that is his view. And that's part of why investigators gather testimony. But was it the full truth? And was it credible?
Democratic investigators have openly expressed skepticism. They describe hitting dead ends. They suggest Wexner downplays the depth of the relationship, that with every hour of testimony, the scope of what he claims not to know expands rather than narrows. That's not just unsatisfying optics. That's investigative friction. And
Mr. Wexner appears to be unaware of much of the money, as he claims, that was given over to Mr. Epstein, trying to downplay how close Jeffrey Epstein and Mr. Wexner actually were.
The more this deposition goes on, the less Wexner knows.
And friction implies heat. The deeper issue isn't whether Wexner committed a crime. No current DOJ charges allege that. The deeper issue is institutional follow-through. If federal prosecutors had documented leads on individuals within Epstein's orbit, and if those leads spanned multiple administrations, why were they not aggressively pursued? That question crosses party lines. Epstein died in 2019, which means any serious lapse stretches across the Trump administration and into the early Biden years. Institutional inertia doesn't respect political branding. Now layer in the political contradictions. Donald Trump publicly promised to get to the bottom of the Epstein scandal. Yet when members of his own circle admitted being on Epstein's island, after years of denial, there was no meaningful sanction, no decisive distancing. The outrage was selective.
The only reason he copped to his lies was that the files outed him. We continue to track others, though, who are facing investigations, ousted from top positions, and other forms of consequences. While it must be noted that Donald Trump, who claimed he would get to the bottom of this, won't even throw someone overboard who was caught on the island.
That inconsistency matters, because when consequences apply unevenly, accountability becomes theatrical. Meanwhile, Maxwell has invoked her Fifth Amendment rights before Congress. That is her constitutional protection. The only mechanism to compel her testimony would be immunity, a move Congress has not taken, which leaves investigators in a familiar position, chasing testimony while key figures legally refuse to speak. So what does that produce? A widening gap between what Congress says it is uncovering and what the Department of Justice has historically been willing to prosecute. And that gap is the real story.
The recent Epstein files showed the DOJ had leads on these people in Epstein's orbit, and others redacted, as you see. This was a big, important document that we only got from the new files. And the DOJ only ultimately prosecuted one, Maxwell. We only know that because Congress overruled Trump and forced out those files.
When Congress starts performing investigative functions typically associated with federal prosecutors, it signals distrust in executive enforcement. That's not routine oversight. That's institutional tension. We are now watching two branches of government indirectly question each other's commitment to accountability.
Here's what's happening today that's new. The House compelling a powerful billionaire who's usually behind the scenes, Les Wexner, to go under oath, to provide answers about his long business history with Epstein.
If DOJ possessed substantive leads and declined deeper inquiry, that suggests selective enforcement. If those leads were insufficient, then transparency about why they failed becomes essential. Silence on either front corrodes trust. Because the Epstein case was never just about one man. It was about access, influence, protection, the ability of wealth to bend scrutiny. When a billionaire transfers extraordinary sums to a convicted sex offender, appears thousands of times in investigative files, and later claims comprehensive ignorance, lawmakers are obligated to probe that claim. Not because of optics, because proximity to systemic abuse demands clarity, and clarity has been scarce. Each deposition raises more questions than it resolves. Each redacted name amplifies suspicion.
So when you take this together tonight, what you have is a type of investigative progress. And there is a big gap here between what Congress says it's trying to do and what the DOJ has done and isn't further doing. And while much of this has been in the heat of this MAGA era, this second Trump term, any reliable, serious allegations that the DOJ didn't chase down obviously goes back more than 2 years, given that Epstein died in 2019, and includes the Merrick Garland DOJ as well.
Each bipartisan hesitation fuels the perception that something larger remains untouched. That perception, fair or not, erodes confidence in equal justice. The Constitution does not promise perfection. It promises process, due process, equal protection, the faithful execution of laws. When leads sit idle, when prosecutions narrow despite broad evidence trails, the appearance of unequal execution emerges. And appearance matters, because once the public concludes that power shields itself, compliance with institutions begins to fracture. This moment is not about partisan scorekeeping. It is about whether accountability scales upward as aggressively as it does downward. If Congress succeeds in extracting fuller testimony, it could expose whether ignorance was plausible or strategic. If it fails, the unanswered questions will calcify into permanent doubt. And doubt, left unresolved, metastasizes. What we are watching now is not closure. It is pressure building inside a system that has not convincingly explained itself. The stakes are larger than one deposition in Ohio. They concern whether America's justice apparatus can convincingly demonstrate that billionaires, cabinet officials, and political insiders face the same scrutiny as anyone else linked to a criminal enterprise. If that scrutiny falters, the damage won't be immediate. It will be incremental. Institutional decay rarely announces itself with spectacle. It reveals itself in quiet non-decisions. The Epstein files were supposed to close a chapter. Instead, they reopened the most destabilizing question of all. Who knew what, and why wasn't it pursued? Stay vigilant. Because in scandals like this, the most important revelations rarely arrive in the first wave. They surface when public attention fades. And if you look away now, you may miss the moment when unanswered questions become permanent truths.